From rags to riches, Henry Ford's life seemed to symbolize the American dream. Always mindful of his days of rural poverty, Ford had a film made about his early years. Henry Ford was born in 1863, 30 years before the first automobile appeared in the United States. He was brought up on a Michigan farm his father was struggling to clear, and his early life was an endless round of farm drudgery. His only formal education was through 5th grade at the local one-room schoolhouse. Henry hated farm work, but he loved tinkering with mechanical things. As a teenager, he became fascinated with steam engines. In a small notebook, he jotted down his own design for a model steam engine and for a water wheel that was built under his supervision by boyhood friends. Henry Ford realized early that one machine could do the work of many men. By 1885, when Ford was 22, America was greeting the industrial age. Cities were being linked by railroads. Farmers were moving into the cities, and urban populations were growing fast, bolstered by a steady stream of European immigrants. They found jobs in newly created industries, huge factories like the Westinghouse Works. It was an important year, 1893, the year the Duryea brothers ran the first gasoline car in the United States. At 28, Ford started working as a machinist at the Edison Company. He gained a reputation for being able to fix things, and he would stay in the shop long after hours tinkering and doing his own experiments. In 1895, he built a single-cylinder engine that could power a light bulb. The next year, he and a friend handcrafted one of the country's first cars. It was built around a bicycle frame and ran up to 20 miles an hour. Although Ford's horseless carriage went relatively unnoticed, the automobile did not. Between the years 1896 and 1908, more than 300 car companies were formed. Most of them folded within a year or so. Powered by gas, steam, or electricity, most of the cars were big, impractical, and very expensive. It was during this time that Henry Ford had a revolutionary idea to make a small, reliable car that everyone could afford. But first, he had to make a name for himself in the automotive world, and he did it in a very dramatic way. In 1901, car racing was a thrilling and dangerous new sport. Cleveland car maker Alexander Winton held the speed record, an amazing 38 miles per hour. Henry Ford decided to challenge Winton in a race. They were neck and neck until Winton's car broke down and Ford coasted on to victory. Ford gained fame not only as a racer, but also as a builder of reliable cars. He was now able to find financial backers to form his own automobile company. In 1903, the Ford Motor Company was opened for business. In its first year, Ford Motors sold 700 cars. The next year, 7,000. To meet the rising demand for cars, Ford built the largest factory in the world at Highland Park in Detroit. Ford dealerships were set up around the country, and models ranged from cheap to flashy. Ford wanted to make the lightweight Model N. The company directors saw more profit in the expensive touring car. But Henry Ford wasn't just after profit. He believed the world could be made better by the automobile. His vision gave birth to the Model T, the people's car, he called it, a car that would bring families together.
Johnny O'Connor owned an automobile. He took his sweetheart for a ride last Sunday. He was dressed up in his best Sunday clothes. She nestled close to his side. Things went just dandy till they got
This
down
is an
the
early
road.
advertising film for the Model T. The car does everything, goes everywhere, even up hills.
Everything needed repair. So he got out and got under, got out and got under.
In 1908, Model Ts cost $825. 8 years later, they were down to $360. At that price, almost every working man could buy one.
Johnny, one day, your little sweetheart don't appreciate you. I have a daughter who is hungry for love. She likes to ride, by the way.
America fell in love with the Model T. It was rugged, cheap, and came in one color, black. All work, no frills. It owed much to its maker's simple origins. While other manufacturers were making luxury cars, the Ford Company was moving in the opposite direction. The demand for Model Ts was doubling every year. But there was a problem with the moving assembly line. The work was so hard and tedious that Ford's employees were quitting at an alarming rate. Ford wanted more loyalty from his workers, so in 1913, he made one of his shrewdest business decisions. He doubled everyone's wages to an unprecedented $5 a day. Some newspapers called the pay raise an economic blunder, but on the street, Ford was hailed as a friend of labor. The auto industry was becoming the largest in the country, and Ford was now a man of national importance. President Wilson paid him a visit in Detroit. So did Helen Keller. At 51, Ford was at the height of his career. Now a multi-millionaire, he was free to turn to more philanthropic pursuits. He created a trade school which gave boys a grounding in mechanics, in the sciences, and a general education. Ford even paid the boys for their work. He developed a program to teach English to his immigrant workers. He also started a hospital. Henry Ford's social programs enhanced his public image as a folk hero. He was seen as a simple family man, a farm boy made good, a progressive man during a progressive and prosperous time in the United States. Then came World War I. A confirmed pacifist, Ford joined a peace mission to stop the war in Europe. But the effort was a dismal failure, and Ford was ridiculed by the press. Stunned by his first public embarrassment, Ford would grow more bitter and resentful in years to come. 3 years after the ill-fated peace mission, the United States joined the war, and without explanation, Henry Ford went from piecework one week to war production the next. Mass production of Navy anti-submarine ships called Eagle boats began on a grand scale, typical of Ford. This was the first time in industrial history that Ford's techniques were applied to large structures. A whole Eagle boat could be built in just 10 days. Ford had promised that he would not take 1 cent of profit from the war. But, in fact, he made a great deal of profit from every boat, helmet, plane, and Model T he produced for the war effort. The press was becoming increasingly critical of Henry Ford. They called his profits from the war blood money and claimed that Edsel, age 24, should have been drafted. The company said that Edsel was needed at home to run the Eagle boat program. Edsel Ford was devoted to his father, but the two men were remarkably different. Edsel did not possess Henry's iron will. He was kind, sensitive, and spent his entire life in his father's shadow. Although Edsel took over as president of the company in 1918, his father was still very much in control. And for Henry Ford, control meant absolute power. When the war was over, he used the Eagle Boat factory site on the Rouge River to build a vast new car factory. He bought a rubber plantation in Brazil so he could make his own tires, and tracts of timber in northern Michigan for car bodies. He also bought coal mines and built his own power plant. Ford now controlled every facet of car production. He even built a plant to make his own steel. But Ford himself seldom came to the Rouge. The plant was run by one of Ford's henchmen and a strange array of thugs and strongmen. While Ford spent most of his time at the company headquarters in Dearborn, working conditions at the plant were deteriorating. To meet the increased demand for Model Ts, the assembly line was speeded up to almost intolerable levels. The size, the noise, the cramped workspace, conditions at the Rouge were brutal. Talking was forbidden. So were labor unions. Ex-convicts were employed as company spies to spot idlers. Production of Model Ts had now reached 1 million a year. But with inflation, profits were only $2 a car. Gone was the affluence of the $5 day. Ford wages in 1924 were worth less than they had been 10 years before. While his factory was churning out Model Ts, Henry Ford turned his attention back to the farm. In the 1920s, 97% of all farmers were still plowing with horses. Ford's longtime dream was to build a machine that would ease the farmer's burden. He supervised the design of a tractor that was cheap, rugged, and lightweight. Like the Model T, it was a brilliant piece of engineering, and its price was within reach of the ordinary farmer. Ford was spending more and more time in the country. His celebrated camping trips were exercises in pleasure and publicity. With men like Harvey Firestone on the left and Thomas Edison in the middle, these gatherings brought together some of the industrial geniuses of the 20th century. Although Henry Ford was a mechanical wizard, he was not an educated man. He believed his down-home folk wisdom and rural philosophy could solve many of the world's problems, and he decided to publish his views. To do so, he bought a newspaper. But the Dearborn Independent carried a bitter sting. From his days of rural poverty, Ford had a complex mistrust of banking and moneylenders. What do we get for borrowing from the banks, and where do they get the money? He wrote in his semi-literate hand. To Ford's way of thinking, banks controlled nations and Jews controlled banks. He was a paranoid anti-Semite, and his newspaper spread the message. In the early 1920s, 91 articles attacked the Jews. Ford was sued. Ironically, his friend, Rabbi Leo Franklin of Detroit, persuaded Ford to publicly apologize. He took the advice, but not because he saw the error of his ways. He just couldn't afford the bad publicity. General Motors was now making a new six-cylinder car that was cutting into Ford's market. The mid-20s were a prosperous time, and people wanted a little more luxury in their automobiles. To fight the competition, Ford made some changes in the Model T. It had always been difficult to handle, so Ford redesigned the car with a self-starter. But more people could now afford an extra $100 for style. A radical decision was made. It was time to build a new Ford. In 1927, Model T production stopped and 12,000 employees were laid off. The laboratory started testing for new engines and materials. The emphasis was on strength, and the other key to mass production, precision. By 1927, the Model A was ready for the road. The Model T had affectionately been called a Tin Lizzie, but this car had style.
Have you seen her? Ain't she great? She's something you'll appreciate. I'm sure you'll understand just what I mean. Everybody, why, everywhere is falling for her now. I'm talking about the new Ford, and boy, it's sure a wow. No more bruises, no more aches. Since she's got those four-wheel brakes, Henry's made a lady out of Lindsay. She's even got a rumble seat and lots of style and class. The horn just seems
In 1929, more than 2 million Model A's were sold worldwide. But by the end of that same year, the wheels of industry came to a grinding halt. The stock market crashed. The Depression was on. In 1930, sales were down by 50%. Wages were cut by almost 40%, and half of Ford's employees lost their jobs. By 1932, the situation was desperate. No longer able to feed their families, 3,000 men marched to the Rouge River plant, demanding a halt to wage cuts, an improvement in working conditions, and the right to form labor unions. They were met with tear gas, water hoses, and bullets. 4 men were killed, and with them died Henry Ford's image as a friend of labor. Ford's hatred of unions alienated him from Edsel, who saw the company declining because of its old-fashioned ways with labor. In 1937, GM signed with the newly formed UAW, the United Auto Workers Union. So did Chrysler. Labor unions now started to make some gains in improving their working conditions. The UAW decided it was time to take on Ford Motors, but they were in for a bloody fight. 2 union organizers, Walter Reuther and Richard Frankenstein, were pitted against Ford Motor strongmen at the number 5 gate. The beating of Frankenstein brought Ford employees solidly behind the UAW, but it would be 4 more years before Ford would sign a contract. The unrest of the 30s had taken its toll on Henry Ford. By 1940, he had already suffered 1 stroke and was becoming more bitter and withdrawn. At the 1940 World's Fair in New York, the new Ford V8 was on display, but it would be the last one built for 9 years. Europe was at war again, a fact that Ford stubbornly refused to believe. When the U.S. joined the war, Ford Motors joined war production, this time under Edsel's supervision. The factory, called Willow Run, was the ultimate in Ford production methods. The assembly line for B-24 bombers was a mile long. The plan was to assemble 1 plane every hour, but that goal was never achieved, and ultimately, the project proved too much for Edsel. He became sick, harried by his father, and wasted with ulcers. Edsel died of stomach cancer in 1943, just 5 months shy of his 50th birthday. 3 months later, Edsel's son, Henry II, was discharged from the Navy so that he could head the Willow Run project. Henry II was strong and ambitious, and within 2 years, he was president of Ford Motors. By then, his grandfather was in failing health and slipping into senility. Henry Ford died in 1947 at the age of 84. 70,000 people came to pay homage to him as he lay in state at the site of his boyhood home. They buried the bad things and remembered the good. Most of all, they remembered the man who built a car that everyone could buy, that took them everywhere and brought them great happiness. But when he died, Henry Ford left the company in trouble. By normal accounting, the only profit since 1927 came from the war years. Henry II's job was to bring the company back to life.
This is the Ford Product Planning Committee, a team of top executives who coordinate all of Ford planning activities.
Within 5 years, Henry II transformed the company into an efficient, profit-making corporation with a modern management structure. By 1952, Henry Ford, the founder, might not have recognized the company or the cars that were being built. But one thing had not changed. America was still in love with the automobile.
Jim Johnson's a pretty normal guy ordinarily, but lately he's been acting very strange. Mine seems to be a million miles away. Mrs. Johnson and Judy are getting worried about him. Last night, for example, he turned down a piece of his favorite pie. The other day, he even kicked that car he's always been so proud of. And is always writing figures of some kind on the backs of envelopes. No, this isn't like Jim at all. There must be something wrong. That magazine he was looking at, maybe that's a clue. Yes, that's the answer. Surprised you didn't guess, aren't you? Well, there's only one thing to do. Only one cure. And Mrs. Johnson is wise enough to know it. She knows the only medicine for this condition in the American male is this.